Even though it's not fun to wait for football to play again, it is fun to look back at the last 10 years and reminisce about what has taken place. We've already looked at the best programs of the 2010s, but there is a difference between a great program and a great team. Programs are evaluated over time. Teams are evaluated in a single season. Just because a team won a championship does not mean it is one of the best teams of the decade. So what were the decade's best teams? Let's find out. Number 10, 2019 West Florida. Our newest national champion comes in at the 10 spot. After suffering a season-opening loss at Carson-Newman, the Argos racked off 7 straight wins before falling by 5 at Valdosta State. That's not necessarily a resume that lands a team on this list, but West Florida's playoff resume is. The Argos opened with a 38-17 win at Wingate and followed that by avenging their earlier loss to Valdosta State. On the road again, they knocked off Lenoir-Rhyne. In the semifinals, they beat the odds-on favorite to win it all, Ferris State, by 14. And the Argos won the championship by holding off undefeated Minnesota State 48-40 behind the arm of All-American Austin Reed. Number 9, 2011 Pittsburgh State. The Gorillas sandwiched one of the best teams of the decade in between a few subpar seasons, at least by Pitt State standards. The 2011 Gorillas dominated most opponents during the season, suffering only one loss, which was to Washburn in the second-to-last game of the regular season. But after a first-round bye, they would avenge that loss in the playoffs. They beat the Bods 31-22 and followed that up by blowing past Northwest Missouri 41-16. Delta State was Pitt's next victim. PSU dominated 49-23 to earn a trip to the championship, where they handled Wayne State 35-21. The Gorillas were led by Player of the Year Nate Dreiling on defense, as well as John Brown, who was dynamic as a receiver and a returner. Number 8, 2014 CSU-Pueblo. What is most interesting about the 2014 Thunderwolves is not who they beat, but who beat them. CSUP's overall margin of victory on the season was nearly 23 points a game, and its average margin of victory in the playoffs was over 14. But in the regular season, they were somehow upset 23-22 by what would end up being a 3-8 Fort Lewis squad. It's as bad a loss as you will see on a champion's resume. Having said that, the Thunderwolves were dominant in almost every other game from there on out. After an easy 52-14 win over Angelo State to open the playoffs, the Wolves had back-to-back 3-point wins over Ohio Dominican and West Georgia, which earned them a trip to the national championship. Led by Player of the Year Darius Allen and corner C.J. Roberts, the Thunderwolves were especially salty on defense, as evidenced by their 13-0 win over Minnesota State in the championship. It was the first championship shutout since 1997. Number 7, 2017 Texas A&M Commerce. Texas A&M Commerce's rise from also-ran to national champion came to fruition in 2017, when the Lions captured the title with a 37-27 win over West Florida. Their only blemish was a 47-42 loss to Midwestern State. Even with that loss, the Lions had a 20-point average differential during the season. An 8-7 win over North Alabama was the only regular season win by fewer than 10 points. We saw the same type of results in the playoffs. The only exception, a 34-31 overtime win at Central Washington, where they had to overcome a 28-3 halftime deficit. Otherwise, they beat Winona State by 14, Minnesota State by 10, and Harding by 14, in addition to the 10-point championship victory. Commerce was the first team to win 5 playoff games to win a championship. Luis Perez was named Player of the Year and won the Harlan Hill Trophy after throwing for a yard under 5,000 and 46 touchdowns. Number 6, 2010 Minnesota-Duluth. This is the first undefeated team on the countdown. The Bulldogs were dominant during the regular season. They won every game by at least 20 points. They won 6 games by at least 30. They won 5 by at least 40. The playoffs? That's a different story. St. Cloud, a team they beat by 23 in the regular season, took the Bulldogs to overtime in Duluth's first-round game. It was a little easier against Augustana, who they beat 24-13. A late touchdown in a frigid semifinal game against Northwest Missouri gave them a 17-13 win, and it took a field goal with time expiring to beat Delta State 20-17 for the national championship. Kyle Fechtelkotter, Robbie Arich, and Cody Ike led a Bulldog defense that held opponents to under 13 points a game on the way to earning the program's second 15-0 season and the number 6 spot on the list. Number 5, 2018 Ferris State. The Bulldogs were the first 15-win team not to be crowned champion. They were also one of the best teams of the decade. 2 points are all that separated Ferris from having a chance to be the first 16-0 team in D2 history. In addition, dual-threat quarterback J. Campbell won the Player of the Year and the Harlan Hill Trophy. Ferris rolled through the regular season, only facing resistance from Ashland and Grand Valley. In the playoffs, the competition stiffened. FSU escaped with a 21-19 win over Harding and a 27-21 win over Northwest Missouri. After handling Ouachita Baptist and Minnesota State, Valdosta State was all that stood between the Bulldogs and the championship. In a great back-and-forth game, Ferris State cut the Valdosta State lead to 49-47 with 40 seconds left. However, the Bulldogs were unable to force overtime when a reverse pass fell incomplete. Nonetheless, the 2018 Bulldogs were one of the 5 best teams of the decade. Number 4, 2013 Northwest Missouri. This is the first of 3 championship teams for the Bearcats in the decade. Player of the Year Matt Longacre, as well as cornerbacks Brandon and Brian Dixon, all played in the NFL and were part of a defense that allowed the Cats to outscore opponents by 28 a game over the entire season. They won every game by double digits, aside from a 4-point win over Central Missouri and a 9-point win over Pittsburgh State. The playoffs weren't much different. They opened the playoffs with blowout wins over Minnesota-Duluth and St. Cloud. In the semifinals, the Bearcats beat GVSU 27-13 and followed that up with a 43-28 win over Lenore-Rhine in the championship game. Number 3, 2015 Northwest Missouri. This team featured one of the best defenses that D2 has seen. Defensive linemen Brandon Yost and Colin Bevins were named first-team All-Americans, while Kevin Berg and Bryce Inyard earned honors in the secondary. The defense recorded 60 sacks and held opponents to under 13 points per game. The Bearcats won by almost 30 points a game during the regular season and over 27 during the playoffs. A 54-7 win over Humboldt State was followed by a 38-17 win over Emporia State. West Georgia provided the most resistance in the playoffs, but Northwest won 38-23. The Bearcats beat Shepherd 34-7 for the national championship in front of over 16,000 fans, and did so in impressive fashion. Shepherd was held to 97 yards of total offense and negative 87 yards rushing. The Northwest defense recorded 10 sacks in the game. Number 2, 2018 Valdosta State. While J. Campbell won the Harlan Hill Trophy in 2018, Blazer fans contend their quarterback should have won instead. They might have a case. Rogan Wells threw for over 3,000 yards and 38 touchdowns, while rushing for 896 yards and 11 touchdowns. He led a Valdosta State offense that scored 52 points per game and outscored opponents by 29 points per game. He finished second to Campbell in the Hill Trophy voting, but finished first where it mattered most, in McKinney. He threw for 349 yards and 5 touchdowns, rushed for 39 yards, and even caught a 25-yard touchdown pass on a trick play. As he had done all year, he spread the ball and distributed to 9 different receivers. The 2018 version of the Blazers was extremely dominant. The Blazers won every game by more than 10 points until the last 2 games of the season. They beat Notre Dame College 30-24 in the semifinals before holding off Ferris State in the finals. This was the second Valdosta State champion of the decade and its fourth overall. It is arguably the best VSU team of all time. Before we reveal the best team of the decade, let's take a look at some teams that could have made the cut. It's important to note that Minnesota State had several teams eliminated in the playoffs by teams on this list. Number 1, 2016 Northwest Missouri. The best team of the decade belongs to the best program of the decade. The 2016 Bearcats were the third of Adam Dorrell's 3 championship teams. Seniors on this team won 3 championships while losing only 2 games. But inclusion on this list is not about a career. It's about a single season. And the 2016 Bearcats were so good that there is no doubt they belong in the top spot. Kyle Zimmerman led an offense that was even more explosive than the previous years and finished second in Harlan Hill Trophy voting. Combined with a typically staunch defense, Northwest outscored opponents by over 33 points per game for the entire season and by 27 points per game in the playoffs. The closest the team came to the Bearcats that year, 15 points. The 2016 Northwest Missouri team is the second best team in the history of D2, according to Massey Rating. They are the consensus pick for the best team of the decade. Agree or disagree? Join the best fans in D2 on the message board and state your case. D2football.com has been around since 2000, meaning we've covered 20 years of Division II football. In the future, we will highlight the things that have happened in that time period. Our first video, we will count down the best new programs of the D2football.com era, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, thanks for watching and supporting D2football.com, the center of the D2 world.